The third function was the nazi, the displaying or postponement of the sacred month by intercalation. When Islam came, the sacred months had returned to their original times, and Allah established them firmly and abolished the nazi.
Pre-Islamic Arabs, unlike civilized people around them, had yet to switch away from the lunar calendar. But to their credit, they were at least observing intercalation to keep their seasons intact. Muhammad abandoned intercalation, condemning Muslims to a 354-day year. Not only didn't the pagan sacred months return to their original times, he assured that they would never be established, forever floating around the solar year. While foolish, the lunacy honored his God's lunar legacy. One of the most revered Islamic legends comes from this period. A series of hadith focused on
the rebuilding of the Kaaba.
Begin with this report.
Tabari, a relative of Abd Mahaf,
slave to the sun god,
had stolen treasure from the Kaaba. They took him to a female Arab soothsayer, who, in her occult skill, pronounced the rhyming prose that he should not enter Mecca for 10 years because of his violation of the sanctity of the Kaaba.
This Islamic tradition confirms what I shared earlier. Soothsayers are satanic. They are occult mediums. Further, she recited in the same style of the Quran, rhyming prose. And more incriminating still, a devil worshipper is being used to proclaim the sanctity of the Kaaba. The reason this story is included in the presentation of rebuilding Allah's house is that the shrine's low walls and open top made it easy for looters to steal the gods. So when the Meccans found that
a ship belonging to a Greek merchant had been driven ashore by rough seas at Jeddah and had been broken to pieces, they took its timbers and prepared them for use in roofing the Kaaba. There was a Copt in Mecca who was a carpenter, and thus they had both the materials and a craftsman ready at hand.
This serves to confirm the primitive nature of the Kaaba and of Mecca itself. There was no source of wood, and without wood there were no carpenters. Without wood and men to work it, all buildings were open to the harsh elements. Mecca in the time of Muhammad was a motley collection of open mud huts. This is important because Islam is said to have arisen because the Meccans were flaunting their wealth. That simply wasn't possible. The next transition is as disjointed as the Quran, and equally revealing.
There was a snake which used to come out of the well in the Kaaba, into which votive offerings were thrown. It would lie on top of the Kaaba wall every day to sun itself. It was a terror.
There are way too many satanic symbols associated with Muhammad and Allah. Abraham was drawn from Israel to Mecca by God's presence in the form of a snake. The snake coiled itself up, showing Abraham where to build the Kaaba. Now a snake is living inside Allah's house. The snake and the apple sign on Muhammad's back are Satan's most enduring symbols.
Ishaq. People were terrified of the snake because whenever anyone went near, it would draw itself up, make a rustling noise, and open its mouth. One day, as it was lying on top of the Kaaba as usual, Allah sent a bird which seized it and carried it off.
And who said Allah could do miracles?
On seeing this, the Quraysh said, "We may hope that Allah is pleased with what we intend to do. We have a craftsman and we have timber, while Allah dealt with the snake." Tabari. This was 15 years after the sacrilegious war. Muhammad was 35. When they made the decision to demolish and rebuild the Kaaba, Abu took a stone, from which it leapt from his hand and returned to its place.
This hadith, in context of Muhammad's imminent involvement in the Kaaba reconstruction and its black stone, strongly suggest that the Meccans thought the black stone was Allah, and that it, actually lived in the Kaaba.
Ishaq. The people were afraid to demolish the temple and withdrew in terror from it. Al-Walid said, "I will begin the demolition." He took his pickaxe and walked up to the house, saying, "O Kaaba, do not be afraid. O Allah, we intend nothing but good." Then he demolished part of it near the two corners.
One of Muhammad's religious contemporaries is telling a rock pile not to be afraid. Approaching Allah with a pickaxe, he says that he means him no harm. How is a pickaxe threatening to God? And if he were God, and you approached his house with a pick, a carpenter, and some wood, don't you think you'd be able to figure it out? In his final tradition, prior to the first Quranic revelation, Muhammad is shown personally participating in the superstitions of his people's stone-worshipping milieu.
Tabari. A man of the Quraysh who was among those demolishing it thrust a crowbar between two stones to pry one of them up. When the stone moved, the whole of Mecca shook. They knew they had reached the foundations. The clans then gathered the stones to rebuild the Kaaba. Each clan gathered separately and built separately. When they reached the place where the black stone was to be put, they began to dispute about it, since every clan wished to lift the black stone to its place.
Once again we are confronted with a stark reality. Allah's house, the center of Islam, was a rock pile, and it was rebuilt in like fashion. The stones were not hewn, cut, or mortared. There was no plan. They were just collected and piled. And once more we are forced to see the sacred black stone for what it was, Allah. This next tidbit is particularly incriminating.
Ishaq. The Quraysh found in the corner a writing in Syriac. They could not understand it until a Jew read it for them. It read, "I am Allah, the Lord of Mecca. I created it on that day that I created heaven and earth, and formed the sun and moon."
God writing in Syriac, not Arabic, conflicts with the Quran's claim that Arabic was Allah's language. Further, since written Arabic evolved from Syriac and migrated to Mecca, it's clear that the written language of the Quran was unknown to the Meccans at the time Muhammad claims the surahs were revealed to him. That's a big oops.
The Quraysh remained in this state for 5 days, and then they gathered in the mosque to consult together and to reach an equitable agreement.
We are reminded that the mosque preceded Islam, and that prostration, the Islamic prayer position from which the word was derived, was part of idolatrous worship. It is apparent that relatively little of Islam was invented by Muhammad. The payoff line for this hadith is upon us.
Tabari. Men of the Quraysh said, "Make the first man who comes in at the door of this mosque the arbiter of our differences, so that he may judge on the matter." The first man was Muhammad, and when they saw him they said, "This is the trustworthy one, with whom we are satisfied. This is Muhammad." He came up to them, and they told him about the matter, and he said, "Bring me a cloak." They brought him one, and he took the black stone and placed it on it with his own hands. Then he said, "Let each clan take one side of the cloak, and then lift up together." They did so, and when they had brought it to its place, he put it in position with his own hands.
I do not know if Muhammad actually suggested this solution, but I know that a man who reveres a stone is no wiser than the rock he reveres.